everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about specifically what it means to have your Mars in Pisces or Mars in the 12th house. My name is Brandon. I do astrology videos here on YouTube, and this is part of a much larger series that I'm finally finishing up, actually, where I go through every single planet and every single sign and house. I have a playlist down below where I've gone through everything prior to this, and as soon as this Pisces week's done, that playlist will be complete in so many different ways. It's a very bittersweet moment, but I'm really, really grateful to have done this series. I think there's so much within this, but all that aside, this video is specifically for Mars in Pisces or Mars in the 12th house. So with that, I'm going to be putting down in the description box a couple links to figure out if you even have your Mars in Pisces, what that is. Because some people come into astrology, they know their sun sign typically, and maybe they know their moon sign, but they might not know their Mars sign. So it's really important to understand what your Mars is. So there's a link down below to figure out if you have your Mars in Pisces, to generate your birth chart, to figure that out. And if you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me in any way, shape, or form on any of my socials, things like that. This video is going to be broken up into a couple different portions. So the first portion is going to be specifically talking about Mars and astrology, what that means within just kind of the astrological makeup. And then we're going to be talking about Mars in Pisces and then Mars in the 12th house. So it is very important for you to understand kind of all those things. And this series is really something that I'm creating to really create a foundational kind of building blocks for a lot of different people so that they can have something to build upon. And with this playlist, there's so many different things in which you can kind of bounce around and kind of put your chart together, because that's ultimately what astrology is utilized for. Yes, I can sit here and tell you what I see within the chart, and I do that for many, many people, but it is something that ultimately that truth is meant to come from you and through your own kind of internal compass in a way. Yes, astrology is some sort of compass, some sort of map, but it is not as true as it is for you. I can look at your chart, but I have not lived your life, and therefore I don't have all of the experience. I have some things, but it's important for you to know specifically what it is that your kind of like purpose is in a lot of ways, and that can be seen through your chart, but I really urge you to kind of do your own kind of self-analysis and don't rely too much on anyone external for that. I can guide you to those things. I'm happy to do that, as well as many other astrologers are as well. But ultimately, listen to yourself, go through this playlist, and kind of put your chart together in that way. But yeah, and then obviously you guys know this is YouTube, so please like, comment, share, subscribe. All those things are going to help me, because that's what I'm here to do. I love astrology. I love being able to do this. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment down below, all of those things. But before, we get a little bit too much deeper in all the introductory stuff, there's not much more I have to say. Let's just go right into specifically what Mars means within astrology. So Mars in astrology. Mars is this planetary body that is a little aggravating from an astrological perspective. It is also very motivating, very inspiring. It wants us to get up and go. It has a lot of connections to motivation, to anger, to drive, to just the energy that you have within a day, and what you can do with that energy, and how you allow yourself to really be lit up by something and driven and inspired. Mars is one of the difficult planets. All planets can be difficult. All planets can have their ability to cause some difficulties, some sort of struggle. And Mars and Saturn are the ones that really can kind of bring that about. But Mars is a lot more on the personal level. Saturn does have a lot of personal kind of struggle within it, but Saturn's a lot more long-term. Mars is a lot more like within, a more short amount of time, like within a first couple of years or couple of months, or within a day, right? There's very much this kind of quicker transit or cycle that Mars is linked to, because Mars takes about 2 years to go around the entire zodiac, 2.5 years. And it has this quality of really, really fighting for something, really, really fighting to move something. It's where energy just kind of is at a peak or at a valley, and understanding that. And Mars really wants us to drive ourselves towards something, towards some goal, utilize our energy towards something, right? It has a lot to do with conflicts. It has a lot to do with areas of passion, areas of anger, of things that get us up and get us driven to go after our goals, right? And Mars has a lot of connections to obviously Aries and Scorpio, because those are the signs that it rules, so it's comfortable within those signs. And then Mars is considered to be exalted in the sign of Capricorn. Now, when we think about Mars in Aries, Scorpio, or Capricorn, these are all prominent places for Mars to be. Mars knows what it's doing, so it knows how to work within conflict. Now, the signs opposite of those three, so Taurus, Libra, Taurus, and Cancer, are all where Mars does not do that well. Mars is not as comfortable in those signs because they are either Venusian signs or they are completely opposite, where Mars is said to be exalted, which would be Mars in Cancer, would be that fallen kind of placement opposite Mars in Capricorn. Then Mars in Taurus, Mars in Libra as well. Now, the thing about Mars in Pisces, which we'll get to this when I get into the video, there's no like inherent sort of dignity within this. It's very interesting because Mars in Pisces is the only other Mars sign in water, and the other two Mars signs have their own sort of power and struggle in a lot of ways. Mars in Scorpio is obviously at home, and then Mars in Cancer is it's considered exiled. It's considered like outside of the home in a lot of ways, and not really allowed to do Martian things. It really struggles to do Martian things. So Mars in Pisces has its own unique signature in that way, which I'll get to that in a moment. But it's important to know what your Mars sign is and kind of how it's interacting. Of course, look to your Mars aspects as well. I'll get to that. But I'm not going to be doing that much in this video. This is really just Mars in Pisces, Mars in the 12th house, and what that means. And then, of course, if you are born during the day, Mars is going to be a little bit more difficult to work with versus born at night. Mars is going to be a little more powerful, more constructive in a lot of ways. So it is important to understand the concept of sect, which is where Mars and Saturn kind of work more constructively versus destructively, dependent upon what part of the day you were born under. So there's a lot of power there with Mars. Mars is a lot about power, a lot about anger, militaristic kind of energy, motivation, working out, things like that, utilizing your physical vitality, building that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Mars and astrology before we talk about Mars and Pisces. So I'll see you guys in the next part. We talk about Mars and Pisces. So we have Mars in the sign of Pisces. Now, this sign is one of the most enigmatic and elusive signs of the zodiac. It's the last sign of the zodiac. It's the sign that collects everything before it, that is connected to something that is so unreal, unearthly, not grounded. It's so spiritually attuned. It's so psychic. It's so connected to things that we can't see. Pisces is all about this ability to touch divinity, to utilize divinity, and to walk in that sense of faith. And when we think about Pisces, the opposite of Pisces is Virgo, and we think about how in Virgo there is this really deep desire to be grounded in reality, to be grounded in what it is that you can do and accomplish in your day-to-day, and pay your bills and take the trash out and do your dishes, and all those things are very Virgoan. And there's a sense of routine, there's a sense of physical kind of trust that's given to Virgo. But then when we place anything in Pisces, it's the opposite of that. It's the non-physical trust. It's the, spiritually kind of going into deep meditation and kind of disconnecting from reality. And it can be very difficult for planets to be in Pisces. And I think Mars is one of those that struggles in its own unique way, but also has a lot of gifts in its own unique way that every Pisces placement isn't really going to have in its own sense. The moon, I think, is the other one that's probably the closest to the level of use that a Pisces placement can have. And I think the Mars in Pisces has a very driven aspect to it, but it's driven by divinity. It's driven by that connection to spirit, that connection to God, to source, to divinity, whatever it prescribes to, its connection to something higher, its ability to trust. And as I had talked about with the moon in Pisces video, about how Pisces placements, they have more of an ability to get lost and dissolve themselves into something and lose themselves. And I think with Mars Pisces, because Mars rules our motivation, it rules our willpower, it rules what drives us, we can get lost in something, lose our willpower, lose our ability to act on things, and we can just get lost in a wave, right? The Pisces kind of archetype is very nebulous, very wavy, very foggy. It's very much this connection to the subtle waves within a day-to-day, and Mars wants to get stuff done. Mars wants to act. It wants to be productive. It wants to go after its goals. It wants to utilize its energy, right? It wants to go and be productive and act on things. But in Pisces, it's being connected to things that are so subtle, and it's being kind of pushed and prodded in ways that are very, very subtle, but are able to help guide the Mars Pisces individual towards what it is that they're supposed to be doing, right? Their motivation will come when they feel divinely inspired. That's why you'll see so many really, really prominent artists with Mars and Pisces placements in general. Like they're connected to a space that is otherworldly, and Mars wants them to be able to fight in that space and pursue whatever it is that spirit really wants of them. These are the spiritual warriors, very much so. Like there's very big indications of that when Mars is in Pisces and in the 12th house, of wanting to really be guided by spirit and be guided by those waves and by the kind of subtleties of energies and environmental and personal kind of energetics, and allow that to guide them. Be like, okay, I'm being guided by this feeling and I'm just going down this stream, right? Mars in Pisces has a very prominent ability in creating conflict in some ways. And in Pisces, it can create conflict in things that you don't see. So you're fighting unknown battles, right? The idea of people fighting their own demons, I think, is a very Mars 12th house, Mars Pisces kind of phrase, where there's a fight going on of something that is unseen, and it's hard when you don't know what your enemy is, right? When the enemy is something that is just so subtle and so not grounded, right? Mars in Virgo, it knows the enemy. It knows the enemy a little bit too well, because it wants to really deeply ground into the details of everything that enemy is doing, and every plan, and plans every attack. Versus Mars in Pisces, it doesn't know where those attacks are coming from, and they become attacked in ways that are so strange and so subtle on an energetic level that they don't even know what they're fighting. A lot of the time they're fighting themselves. A lot of the time they're fighting their projections, their own spiritual biases, their own karma in some ways. They're fighting themselves on such a subtle energetic level, and Pisces has this way of diluting and dissolving and mirroring things and making things foggy and unclear. And with Mars here, there can be a lot of confusion as to what it is that they're doing. Why are they doing this? There's a lot of differences in how Mars and Pisces are going to respond. It's also a mutable sign, so it's going to inherently be this kind of very adaptable kind of ability to go after what you want or what you believe you want. That's another thing. It's really important to know what you believe you want and what you idealize yourself to be. There's a sense of with Mars and Pisces too, over any of the other Pisces placements, there's a sense of delusions of grandeur, thinking that you are much stronger than you are. But there's also, in that same way, there's the same kind of archetype where we see people that can, in immense moments of crisis and immense moments of spiritual attunement or flow to do things that are otherworldly, that are not understandable by our current framework, right? It's very, 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 very powerful. These are very spiritual warriors, very psychic, very intuitive, and they're able to go into the watery spaces of other people and the subtleties and the energetics of others and help clean that up, right? If we put the warrior in the dream space, right, it makes me think of the movie Inception, right, where there is almost this this kind of subtle layer upon layer upon layer of battles going on within someone's psyche that you are inserting yourself into to be able to help navigate and break apart that person's psyche. So there's a lot of really difficult things for Mars to have in Pisces, because it wants to create a very strong warrior, and it wants to be, it's going to be guided by spirit, and it's going to be connected by spirit. But to do that, much like the moon in Pisces, it needs to get kind of thrown into stuff that makes absolutely no sense. And over time, over perseverance, over consistent survival, to know what that reasoning is. And it's hard, because Mars in Pisces can really, if you get too lost in life and you don't have that connection to divinity or that connection to your truth, you can lose yourself and lose your ability to go after your goals, and it can dissolve that. But in the same way, Mars in Pisces can be the philanthropists, the ones that are really boots on the ground, helping people in healing so many different things. They are the spiritual warriors in so many ways, because they have this gift of knowing that if they can't handle it, they know they have a higher power, or they have some spiritual backing that will do it for them or will give them that strength. And so there's a lot of kind of difficult imagery when it comes to this, because Pisces placements, I really believe, are meant to kind of lose themselves to some degree, to regain themselves, to regain that connection. Because the thing about Pisces is it's about being brought into some direction without knowing why, without knowing where or what the purpose is in that. But then in that process of just trusting and just going in that direction, you find something you were not even aware you were looking for. So a good example of that I like to bring up sometimes is I live in the suburbs of Illinois, and there's quite a lot of different metaphysical shops around here. And I remember one day a few years ago, I had just got in my car and I just drove. For me, Pisces rules my third house, so driving is very much a Piscean thing for me. And I just drove, and I didn't have any direction. I didn't have any sort of purpose. I was just driving and trusting where I was being led. And I felt the need to drive north, and I drove north to another spiritual shop. I didn't really know why I was there. I was just like, okay, I'm here. I kind of wanted to come here and see what things are about. And I remember I walked in, and it was almost like I was being guided by spirit specifically to a specific incense that I was looking for a very long time, that I hadn't realized I had run out of, and I had been looking for months ago. And I was guided to that specific incense. It's almost as if I walked into that store and went literally right exactly to where I needed that to be, or where that object was. And that's what kind of Mars and Pisces can have experiences like that, where they are not knowing why they're going in those directions. And then suddenly the realization happens and it makes sense. Because it's a lot about, there's so much guidance to our subconscious and to subtle energies that we're not quite allowed to be aware of all the time. And with Pisces, it really lives in that space of unawareness, which is so hard to motivate themselves from, because they don't know why they're going in that direction. They don't know why they are pursuant of this goal or this direction, or driving this way, or going to this shop, or whatever it might be. But they know that there's something inside of them that feels like it's the right thing. And I think it's really about their ability to discern. Discernment is huge for Pisces. And to do that, they need to really have a subtle sense of their own energy, their own truth, their own guiding system. And Mars here really wants to create a really strong reliance on that, and a really strong trust in yourself and what you can accomplish, and what specifically Spirit is wanting for you to do. And not allow yourself to get too caught up in the kind of the overwhelm of the space. You more than likely will at some point, and you more than likely will have moments of hospitalization or close hospitalization, because once again, Mars in Pisces, you are fighting something, and same with Mars in the 12th, you are fighting something you can't see. You can't understand what it is that you're fighting, so you're fighting everything, and that can be quite messy if you're not spiritually attuned and you know what the bigger purpose is in that. It's almost like there's a puzzle in your motivation. But there's also a beauty in it. There's an artistry in it. There's a sense of being guided by a higher being, a higher power, your higher self in some ways, and allowing that to propel you forward. And that's something I think that Mars does really well in Pisces. It does have connections to both Scorpio and Cancer, because it is the other water sign. So there is a sense here, which is so unique, because Mars in Pisces, it can really see, obviously, very easily, Mars in Scorpio's ability to utilize its emotions and its depth of others, and its awareness of others, to really understand when to act. But then Mars in Cancer, it also sees the Mars in Cancer, so it has that ability of getting too overwhelmed with emotion. So putting it Mars in Pisces, it knows that there's a sense of connecting with others, and knowing how to connect to energies of others and energies of different factors to create success, like Mars does in Scorpio. But it doesn't understand the distinct kind of line that needs to be drawn from Mars and Scorpio, of a when to fight, when to not. And Mars in Pisces can kind of fall into, much like Mars in Cancer, fall into this kind of boundaryless state of emotionality and overwhelm, because it connects to so many different things, and it's fighting so many different subtle battles. Like, you are helping so many different people's energies in ways that you don't even know. And I think it's about, once you know what that is, once you understand how that is for you, once you're aware of your energy, your mental health, your spiritual health, your boundaries are so, so important for Mars and Pisces. And maybe, going into escapism, going into things that are very otherworldly, that are almost other versions of media, that are, escapist in nature, right? Any sort of smoking, drinking, recreational hobbies, art. There's a sense of really deep visionaries here with the Mars and Pisces, and they want to bring that vision to life. But that vision is always changing, right? It's like it's always morphing and melding based off of every single step that they take and every single action that they go and pursue. And Mars here can make it so that there's not a clear path for them in what they're doing, and that path will always change, and the water will always move, and the rug will always be ripped out from underneath them in some way, or it's always shifting kind of landscape that they're moving on. That's very Piscean, is this shift of landscape. It's like trying to walk in some direction while the things below you are falling and they're not as stable. And that's really hard, and I think it's about, at some point, falling into the unknown, that Mars and Pisces wants to be able to say, okay, I know how to survive this. I've survived this battle, right? This unknown battle, this unseen battle that no one talks about. no one's seen, that no one can really understand in the same way that a Mars and Pisces individual can understand about themselves, because you're meant to understand your own spiritual path. And yes, it is going to be interwoven with a lot of people's, because Pisces is the sign of the collective subconscious. And so you are literally placing yourself, your fighting ability, your will, your anger, what you are really wanting to clear up and cut and sever into everyone's energy, into everyone's subconscious desires. And so you can have such a spiritual willpower to you that is so healing once you have done the work, once you have healed yourself and created a sense of confidence in your ability and confidence in the ever-shifting kind of quality. And that's something that allows Mars and Pisces individual to help others through immense crisis, through immense healing in ways that no one like any other Mars sign can do. They're able to really go and live in people's fears and in people's idealizations and visions, and they can do so much. Like I said, there's so much beauty in this placement. Pisces has so much ability. It's so deep, it's so complex in ways that no other sign is, because it is so connected to everything. And Mars here in Pisces is also right before Mars in Aries, where Mars obviously does well. It's Mars at its home sign, so it's Mars really kind of not knowing. I mean, it has some good perspectives because it's able to look at obviously both Mars it's able to look at pretty much every other Mars dignity in ways, because it's able to look to Mars in Capricorn as a sextile, look to Mars in Scorpio as a trine, look to Mars in Cancer as a trine. And it does have some connection to Mars in Taurus, but it doesn't have that Mars in Aries, that trust in itself. So it's hard because Mars is really struggling here because it wants so deeply to understand how to use its will in such a complex manner, and it's going to, and that's why I think Pisces placements have such a unique path for them, because it's always so complex and it's so interwoven into what they're exposed to, and that exposure can be toxic, and it likely is, especially with Mars in Pisces. There's a sense of needing to purify from toxic motivations. Toxic environments are very important, right? Being surrounded by things that are motivating and inspiring, and especially in an artistic sense or a musical sense, relating to music, relating to those spaces are really going to help Mars in Pisces, because that's where Pisces can really connect. Dancing is going to probably be really, really beneficial for Mars and Pisces individuals. Meditation, yes, is true, but dancing in specific, because Mars is how you use your energy, and Pisces is this very vibe connected sort of thing that is within flow, that is within a different, it allows something else to kind of come through. It allows something else to utilize its anger and channel through it. It's a sense of very deep channeling, and like a sense of channeling a lot of power. But to do that, you have to be able to ride the wave that Pisces placements is inherently going to have to ride, and understand what it is that Mars really wants of you, where it wants you to go, what it wants you to move towards, how it wants you to move towards those things. And it's only because you're able to sit with your feelings, sit with your own spiritual gifts, and use those as guidance, and use the environments that don't feel good to you as guidance as well. There's a sense of repelling with Mars in Mars in Pisces. There's a sense of repelling that which is unseen, that is toxic. There's a sense of checking rooms and vibe checking that I think is so important for Mars in Pisces, any Pisces placement, but the ability to go into an environment and feel the subtleties and feel like if it's worth pursuing or not. But there is a sense of Mars in Pisces that there is almost you're unaware of what it is that you're going towards, and you can be misled. And that's very common with Pisces placements, is to feel a sense of confusion or veil being lifted from you in some way, shape, or form as you've gone after your goals and as you've pursued things. Also, people are going to be very confused by what you do, Mars and Pisces. They're going to be very confused as to what it is that you are trying to accomplish, what your goal is, because it's not rooted in one reality. It's rooted in all realities, which is why I think it's so hard for Mars and Pisces to explain to people what it is that they do or why they're doing those things. I mean, granted, that comes with time, but they're so complex. Their motivations are so complex. And they have this sense of connection to others that is so subtle and so unique and so powerful. And it's how they utilize that power, how they utilize that gift of no boundaries, right? How they understand that no boundaries and dissolving and merging with someone or merging with some environment or some cause or some energy is beneficial or detrimental to their goal. You can lose yourself to, drugs, alcohol, environments that are extremely toxic, water-based things, right? Mars and Pisces can also have some very interesting relationships with smoke, and toxins and chemicals. There's a sense of chemical kind of burns might be quite common here. That's more like a medical kind of approach, but there could be a sense of chemical burns or really needing to navigate very subtle energetics. There's a sense of working with chemicals are very Piscean. And that's something you'll see with other more prominent planets in Pisces, like Saturn. There's a sense of working with chemicals. The nodes can also indicate that, but that's a different conversation. I'm not going into that in this series here. And I think there's a quality here with Mars in Pisces of really learning how to trust those subtle things and subtle energies. And there is a sense of fighting something you can't see. There's a sense of hoarding as well. You need to be able to cleanse yourself so you can see your motivations more clearly. Your motivations are never meant to super be clear in general because they're always shifting, but step by step you'll figure out what that light at the end of the tunnel is to some degree. And it'll make sense, and it might be very subtle and very unclear, or maybe one specific image that just becomes so ingrained in your mind, and you're motivating towards that image, towards that feeling, towards that connection, towards that vision that you were given before that motivates you. There's very subtle imprints that are meant to motivate you. As the Mars Pisces, you're meant to be really attuned to things that no one else is and driven by things that no one else is, but it's also hard to see if that's clear for you or if that's not. And you can very easily be misled and deceived. So it's a lot about that discernment once again, and knowing what is your motivation and what is your motivation connected to others, meaning where does that line at, and how much of your energy is wrapped up in other people's stuff and is motivated by things that are not your own. And I think there's a sense of religious or spiritual battles that Mars and Pisces can also indicate, of fighting for spiritual autonomy, fighting for within jails. That's also more Mars 12th, which I'll get to in a minute. But there's a lot here. There's a lot within this video. Within this video as well as within Pisces. Pisces is such a never-ending sort of thing. It doesn't really have an end or a beginning. It just kind of is. And with Mars there, it's like the motivation can be something that is so hard to grasp, but once you grasp it, you feel like you got it in that moment. And you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. Water sports are really important for Mars and Pisces and Mars in the 12th house, doing things that are like hot saunas, wet saunas, things that are deep. Mars and Pisces, as well as most 12th house planets, can really benefit from sensory deprivation and connecting to that sort of space can definitely help a Mars and Pisces individual. It's their motivation, but there's a sense of detoxing as well. There's a sense of detoxing from subtle energies, I think, here, burning up. That's why I think it's important to do saunas and steam baths and steam rooms and stuff like that. I think might help a Mars Pisces to especially get rid of the metals I think is something that I feel is very strongly. I don't know why, just very Mars, Pisces. I don't know why I'm leaning towards medical for this one, but yeah, I think there's a sense of like metal detox that is really strong in this one. Detoxing from things that you know are there and people know are there, but you're more subtly aware of them and sort of subtly sensitive to. So there's a sense with this where you could have a, especially because if you have like Mars and Pisces in the 12th, or Mars and Libra in the 12th, your body's ruled by Mars, or if you're just a Martian individual like Aries or Scorpio in general and you have a Mars and Pisces, there's a sense of your body being connected to things that are unseen and needing to purify that, get rid of that, and there's really deep sensitivity to so many different things. But yeah, Mars and Pisces, there's so much that can be talked about with this, and there's so many different subtleties to every placement, but I think Pisces has the most subtleties tied into it. And I really hope that this helped those of you that have it, those of you that have connected to your Mars and seen this video and kind of been, on this journey of spiritual kind of guidance. And I hope this helps you in a lot of ways feel more attuned and more connected to your own body, your own motivation, your own inspiration, and allow you to continue to go on that journey of trusting yourself and really regaining that ability to discern for yourself, your motivation, your path. What is your path? Because your path could be everything. It could be anything. It could be nothing. But there is a higher purpose as to why you're here. And I think Mars 12th housers and Mars Pisces at some point will realize that as they dissolve into losing what that is. And there's little subtle kind of clues and things that rile you up, that get you going, where spirit is really going to work through you in a lot of ways. That's why these are one of the stronger spiritual warriors, healers, mystics, mediums as well, very much mediums. Exorcists can be very prominent with this one as well, because Mars is about fighting, cutting, protecting things that are unseen, right? Just some interesting stuff here. But anyway, with all that aside, with Mars and Pisces, obviously if you have Mars and Pisces, please let me know your story. I'd love to hear about this one. There's a lot of stuff within this that I think has so much action and so much talking points. But I am going to move on to talk about the Mars in the 12th. But if you're interested in more videos from me, obviously that whole series is up, so you're welcome to watch those things. And also, of course, look to your Pisces aspects as well, what Mars is doing by house, by aspect, and then, of course, what Jupiter is doing to get a better idea of what it is that your beliefs are driven by, why you're driven by those belief systems, and kind of dive into that on your own kind of self-journey as astrology is meant to be. So I hope this helps you, and if you guys are interested in anything with me, obviously, all my stuff's down below. Feel free to book with me, like, comment, share, subscribe. All those things are going to help me, obviously. But yeah, I love you, Mars Pisces individuals, and I'll see you guys in the next part where we talk about specifically Mars in the 12th. Okay, so we have Mars in the 12th house. Now, Mars in the 12th house is going to be different than Mars in Pisces. It's going to have some definite overlap with how it functions, because it is going to still be Mars placed in the area of the chart that is unseen from us, that is not really visible in a lot of ways. It's weird because the 12th house is from an actual astronomical point of view, it is actually the part of the sky that is sunrise. So when we place a planet here in the 12th house, and there's a sense of visibility to others, but not to us, because with the astrology chart, we start at the ascendant and look forward from that, moving into the second, into the third, stuff like that, versus the 12th house is the last house that we're able to really see, and in actuality, it's right behind us. So it's what we came from. So a lot of the time with Mars in the 12th, there's a sense of coming from battling, coming from a sense of these internal kind of struggles that are still unresolved. There's a lot of unresolved issues with 12th house planets because of that, because they are things that are just beyond our comprehension, something that that we're still kind of holding on to from either the experience we had when we were in the womb or from past lives, if you believe in that. And so Mars in the 12th can very much indicate some sense of really intense conflict around when your mother was pregnant with you. And all of that, there was a lot of fighting within that, and kind of issues within that you were asked to that you internalize that energy. Because I think when it comes to the 12th house and the prenatal experience with Mars there, it really irritates, aggravates. So there's a sense of that kind of being around you before you're even born. And then if you really connect to like past lives, there's a lot more of indications of some sort of battle that you're still trying to come to terms with from your past life, or some sort of unseen force that you're fighting that you're not quite aware of. That's true, same for Mars in Pisces, but Mars in the 12th has more of a subtlety to it, because of course Mars is going to be in different signs, and the 12th house doesn't have to be in Pisces. And because of that, there's a sense of very different ways in which you are fighting these private battles. There's a lot of privacy required for 12th house planets. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of things that are very, very secluded, and yeah, very private in a lot of ways. Private planet, really. But it's interesting because, once again, it's right at sunrise, so it's very public to a bunch of other people, and there's a lot within that. And there's a lot of idealization towards that planet from others as well, because during the sunrise, we idealize all of what the day can become. And Mars there is idealizing all of what this person can accomplish. And so there's a lot of really unspoken expectations placed upon you, of a lot of projections of what you're capable of. And so there is a sense here with Mars in the 12th, much like Mars in Pisces, of delusions of grandeur, being connected to something bigger and feeling like you can accomplish more than you're capable of, but that's because you're connected to your willpower in a way that is still holding on to gifts from before, still holding on to connections from your past in some way, some conflict that needs to be resolved. And there's a sense of never-ending conflict in some way. And it will be resolved over time as you have that confidence to journey into things that are unseen and fighting things that are unseen. Much like Mars in Pisces, there's a sense of fighting things that are not visible to you, or that are, fighting maybe like an immune system response in some ways, or fighting chemicals, fighting fog, fighting, these toxins in some way. There's a sense of fighting the air, fighting something that is always there, and we know it's there, and we just trust it's there, but we don't necessarily know how to fight it. It's like it's a very unknown enemy. There's an unknown enemy for Mars in the 12th, and it's about how you fight with that enemy, and how you do that, and what tools you have for that fight. And like I said, there's a lot of privacy here. It's a lot of behind-the-scenes work as well, behind-the-scenes creativity, kind of working to create a beautiful piece of art, but in the way that is not really there, that is not really seen publicly all the time. Like, you're not really letting it be public. It's meant to be more of a private sort of experience. Mars in the 12th, depending upon the sign, obviously is going to have different things it's going to be able to work with here. Mars in its own sign, so in Aries or Scorpio in the 12th, obviously is going to have a lot of power here, because it's going to protect that area of life, meaning that it's going to protect the spiritual areas. There's going to be a lot of spiritual warriors fighting for you, a lot of very strong, unspoken allies in some ways that are really willing to really help you. Now, the thing with this one that's interesting with Mars in the 12th, when Mars is really strong here, it can be like yes, you have a lot of support from very powerful people behind you, in some way, some very big spiritual guidance in some way, but there can also be, because it's still Mars being quite strong in its own sign, there's a aspect of this that is going to create, more than likely, create a sense of just conflict and issue, and it's almost like you're being asked to learn how to fight without being aware of how much spiritual support you have, without being aware that you have all these angels and guides and unspoken kind of things behind you that are really helping you with Mars in the 12th in both Aries and Scorpio. And it's about how you go bravely and tenaciously towards your goal, towards whatever it is that you want to do, and knowing that over time you have more power given to you as you learn to trust yourself. It's very powerful here. It's very much like a witch, very spiritually attuned, but it needs to go through conflict, survive conflict of subtle energies and its own psyche, its own mental health, its own spiritual health, to then realize how much support it really has on the back end. Because Mars in the 12th, in its own sign, has a lot of support in whatever fight it's trying to fight. It's able to help you guide. There's a lot of guidance here in very powerful ways. Mars in Scorpio, different than Mars in Aries. Mars in Scorpio has a lot more power given to it. So there's a sense of really struggling in a very early on with understanding what it is that you're meant to do. But there's a lot of power in both these Mars placements in the 12th. But Mars in Scorpio in the 12th has a very deep spiritual struggle, like almost having nightmares, having very intense spiritual experiences with Mars and Scorpio in the 12th, and needing to know how to purify that, needing to know how to work with that. And it's going to be a lot, but it's going to make you very, very strong, very powerful. You're going to survive that. There's a very deep survival instinct with Mars in its own sign in both Aries and Scorpio in the 12th, and there's a sense of protecting yourself from something in which you don't know what it is yet, but the more you fight it, the more you burn it, the more you sever it, protect yourself from it, protect others from it, whatever that subtle energy is that you're fighting, the more you will be able to realize how much power you truly have and then help lead others in the way that Mars wants you to. There's a sense of really strong spiritual leadership with Mars in the 12th in its own sign. Now, Mars in Taurus or Libra in a Venus ruled sign, there's going to be some difficulty with this one because obviously Mars is wanting to go about getting things done in a very Venusian, calm, respectful way, and Mars just wants to fight. So there is this sense of really understanding what harmony means to the subtleties. There's a sense of almost creating too much peace, and that leading to more conflict later on because you're not willing to address the conflict right then and there. That's more true for Mars in Libra than anything else. Mars in Taurus, there's a sense of self-protectiveness here. But it's interesting because Mars in Venus ruled signs, it's uncomfortable because it's trying to go about fighting for something in a way that is very calm and nice and pure and everything. So there's a sense of creating purity and peace with Venus in the 12th in general, just has that. But when you put Mars in a Venus ruled sign in the 12th, it's almost like it creates peace through conflict. So it's all about finding that resolution within yourself. And being okay with creating conflict with others, as especially Mars and Libra in the 12th, and knowing that that's going to help bring out some subconscious patternings that need to be healed, and working through those conversations and working through those conflicts, because conflicts are really, really crucial for healing. And there's a relationship with conflict that needs to be really, really healed in regards to Mars in the 12th. And Mars in Taurus and Mars in Mars in Taurus and Mars in Libra in the 12th both have a artistic flair to them in some ways. They have a quality of really creating harmony in that subtle world. So there is a sense of artistry with this one that I think is really prominent, that I think needs to be kind of talked about more and motivated more. Look at your motivations of what makes you feel good. There's some interesting sensory stuff with Mars and Taurus over Mars and Libra. Mars and Taurus in the 12th can definitely have some either eating issues or smoking issues, things that you consume, drinking issues. That's more so Mars and Cancer than anything, but I think Mars and Taurus has some interesting oral fixations that they need to work through. Mars and Libra has some like relational fixations and relational conflict issues or some stuff there. There's definitely some marital issues that they've had to experience, maybe some divorce of their family, their parents, stuff like that they've had to kind of work through. There's some aspect with that with Mars and Libra in the 12th. Now, Mars in Gemini and Virgo, so in Mercury ruled signs here, this one does do quite well in some ways. Kind of to go back just 1 second here, to go back to the Mars in Taurus and the Mars in Libra. This is obviously your chart ruler as well, so this actually becomes a lot more prominent for you because you are ruled by Mars. You are a Scorpio rising with Mars and Libra in the 12th, and so you become very personally invested into creating that inner kind of conflict resolution with other people. This one's really unique, and I think there's a lot of relational dynamic issues because Mars and Libra, if you watch my Mars and Libra video, which I recommend you do watch before any of these house portions of these videos, if you watch that, it's all about Mars and Libra really is about creating conflict and creating harmony over and over and over again, and having interpersonal conflicts and knowing how to work with that and knowing how to work within people's conflicts and create harmony And in the 12th, it's you. You are Mars, Scorpio rising, being brought into the 12th house in Libra, and there's a sense of you needing to integrate from other people, and there's a lot of relational kind of mirroring going on, and yeah, there's a lot of find people that create peace with you, but more importantly, Mars and Libra in the 12th, know how to create peace with all the relationships that you've been a part of, and have that be your end goal. Don't have it be conflict, have it be peace. That's what I think is really important for Mars and Libra in general, but in the 12th, I think there's a lot of inspiration around relational conflict that you are too heavily invested in because you think other people need to be stable for you to feel stable, whereas opposed to you creating stability and then bringing that to someone else. That's what I think is really important for Mars in Libra. And then, anywho, so back to Mars and Gemini and Virgo. These are obviously the mental Mars placements here, where Mars is really capable of creating a lot of mental kind of traps for itself. There's a lot of kind of particularly verbal, emotional, particularly verbal abusive kind of tactics that they need to unlearn. Mars and Gemini in general has just a lot of conflict stuff. It kind of is always in conflict in its mind, and it wants people to kind of spar with it in a mental way. And so there's a sense of really deep mental health kind of loops that are happening when Mars is in Gemini in the 12th, where there's a sense of really learning how to create clarity through your mind. But Mars in the 12th is conflict in conversation through your mind. And so there's a lot of inner turmoil, mental turmoil, gaslighting yourself. There's a lot of confusion with this one. Lots of confusion. There's a sense of that here, and what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the inspiration is, what the information is, because it's like the goalpost always moves. The information that you get is never enough. It's always adding to the confusion. It's adding to the layers, and you're getting lost in that as opposed to just taking action. Mars and Gemini is one of those. Go watch the Mars Gemini placement. Mars and Gemini is one of those Marses that I find personally that has a lot of gifts, but also a lot of annoyance with their inability to get things done personally. And I think Mars and Gemini in the 12th can have too much overwhelm, that it's doing too much. It can just overwhelm itself with options and not get anything done, and it can kind of create its own mental prison. And same with that with Mars in Virgo in the 12th. There's some interesting health stuff with this one. All of them have mental health stuff, but I think Mars and Virgo, there's a sense of like, this is the one I would see more commonly with like people that need to do health regimes and health detoxes, and really working out in specific is great for Mars in the 12th and Mars in Pisces, is how to keep that consistent routine of working out. But Mars in the 12th in Virgo has a quality of it that is almost routine, but there's a sense of gut detoxes that are really powerful for Virgo placements. But Mars and Virgo in the 12th, it's detoxing from something that you can't see, that you haven't seen, that you're not looking at. Spiritual detoxes, there's a lot of isolation that's going to help you with Mars and Virgo to help you understand your goals. This one's a little bit better than Mars and Gemini, but there is some difficulty with this one because they don't know what their goals are, what they're fighting for. And once again, Mars in the 12th it's private battles, it's private kind of conversations in the 12th house in Virgo. It's an interesting one because it really requires you to fight for something that you can't, fight for improving something you can't see. Very interesting. I have a friend that has this placement, and it's very, very interesting in so many ways. But anywho, Mars in Leo and Mars in Cancer. So Mars in Leo in the 12th, this one has more of a obviously creative aspect to it, childhood aspect to it. There's a sense of childhood creativity that's needed for this placement. In the 12th house, childhood inspiration, childhood media. There's a lot of like creative capacity for this one to be able to help others in ways that are really giving inspiration in some ways. There's some very interesting, there can be with this Mars in Leo, as much like Mars in Taurus, there can be an aspect of addictions here, or kind of being overly connected to one's joys and needing to see how that's self-sabotaging them. There's a conflict here. There's an inner childhood conflict, very strong with Mars and Leo. Leo in the 12th, it just kind of has that in general, but Mars and Leo has it, I think, more than anything, where they're needing to fight for their recognition, fight for recognizing their inner self, and they're looking for it through other means, but they need to look for it within themselves. in that way. See themselves very clearly, see their motivation very clearly. It's a really weird one. It's a weird one here. Mars in the 12th is just a weird one. It's such a long... This Pisces week, 12th house week, is such a confusing one, but it's so rich in the depth, and there's so much more depth to these out of any of them, really, that I could go into, and I just don't have the time, and I wish I could, but if you want more deep dives into these things, please let me know. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. The Mars in Cancer in the 12th, this one obviously struggles because it's Mars in Cancer in the 12th, so there definitely is some deep family-rooted patterning that needs to break. Mars in Cancer generally has that, but in the 12th, it's fighting private battles in your home. This is very much the family issues, pretty strong. Family karma is pretty strong. Protective nature of the psyche. There's some very interesting things here where you're fighting for something that feels like safety, but it's not, and it never feels safe enough in your mind. And I think that sometimes can help Mars in Cancer in the 12th because it forces you to go deeper and deeper into your own emotions, your own safety, your own ability to regulate yourself, and then your mental health becomes a lot stronger. Because ultimately, Mars in the 12th is going to make you a very deep spiritual warrior, no matter what sign it's in. It's going to make you very emotionally, mentally aware of yourself, so you can then help others. So there's a lot of power in this Mars, even though it is in Cancer. It's hidden, it's dissolved in some way. There is some sense of fighting for homeland in a way, protecting homeland. Interesting stuff here. And then Mars in a Jupiter ruled sign, so obviously Mars in Sag, Mars in Pisces, these are both pretty powerful ones. These are both inspirational in nature, but there is a sense of belief and culture that needs to be deconditioned from. There's a sense of deconditioning. That's true for all Mars and all 12 house planets, but Mars in Sag and Pisces, there's a really deep desire to be very true to your faith, true to your religion, true to your belief system with Mars and Jupiter signs. But it's really about how you purify yourself, how you decondition yourself. There's a lot of deconditioning with that. And then seeing how those beliefs are motivating you, those beliefs are inspiring you, and they are not allowed to help you in that way anymore, and you are utilizing beliefs that are not of value for your motivation. It's really interesting. Mars in Sag in the 12th has a quality of some interesting beliefs that it is following, that it is using to guide it, and that can really help them. There's a lot of spiritual warriors with Mars in the 12th and Sag and Pisces, and there's a sense of movement, creating stuff, teaching people things. There's really strong teaching energy here, so there's a sense of lots of there's interesting spiritual mental relationships with Mars and Pisces, Mars and Sag in the 12th. Very interesting cultural kind of experiences, very intense private battles with that one. And then Mars in Pisces, obviously this is your chart ruler, so this is pretty prominent here, being placed in the 12th house. This is you going into the 12th again. So this just kind of doubles up on everything I've been talking about. If you have Mars and Pisces in the 12th house, this whole video is kind of really geared towards you in some way, shape, or form. But because Mars is in a Jupiter ruled sign, there is a sense of needing to break apart from one's truth and figure out what that truth is, as much as it's merged with other people. And there's a sense of you wanting to merge with everything, and that needs to be something that is helping you and is assisting you in your motivation. There's so much here. There's so much in this one. But there's a lot of this video is like literally entirely about you, so I'd recommend you watch that like in its entirety, because there's a lot within this placement for you in particular that I think is really powerful, and what you can fight for, what you can fight towards in some ways. And then finally, Mars in Capricorn and Mars in Aquarius. This is a very patient sign. Mars in Capricorn has a very strong ability here in the 12th. It's able to create a strong sense of responsibility over what it is allowing to come in. There's a sense of spiritual boundaries that I think Capricorn in the 12th and Mars in Capricorn really understands very prominently how to protect its mental health, but by doing so, it's almost in some way can delay its ability to connect, its ability to heal others, its ability to really work as deeply as Mars really wants to. But this one's pretty prominent as well for people that are in the spiritual business, spiritual arts, and arts in general. There's a sense of artistry and sense of exorcisms as well that is pretty prominent for this, and mediumship that I haven't mentioned and dove as much as I should have in this particular one with Mars in the 12th. But there is a lot of exorcist kind of energy here. Mars in Capricorn, I think, has that pretty prominently out of any of them in the 12th. Mars in Scorpio too, Mars in Cancer, they all kind of have this sense of mediumship, exorcist, spiritual kind of protection in a way. And then Mars in Aquarius, this is a really interesting one because there's a sense of community here and community empowerment, community relatedness in a way, and community kind of advocacy. There's a sense of advocating for specifically homeless people in this one, and advocating for churches, hospitals, placing yourself in those places. That's another thing with Mars in the 12th. There's a sense of fighting in those spaces, or conflict in those spaces, or being drawn to work in those spaces. And that's going to be hospital, that's going to be ashrams, isolating places, jails, prisons. Mars in Capricorn can also be very much prison energy, working with, demons and exorcists and paranormal things can be very Mars in the 12th in general, but Mars in Aquarius has a very community-driven way. Mars in Aquarius in the 12th can also be very prominent in creating paranormal investigation groups in some way, or exorcist groups, or helping groups of people go into these things, creating spiritual retreats. There's a sense of that as well with Mars and Aquarius in the 12th, and being motivated by that, being motivated by the community that you're creating that is very spiritually interwoven. But there's a sense of being too interwoven with community with Mars and Aquarius in the 12th, and just Aquarius in the 12th in general. And so there's a lot here. There's a lot with this placement, and I really hope that this helps you guys. I think there's so much more that I could obviously talk about with this, and I would love to, and I think I try and keep these videos brief, but they've progressively gotten longer as I've wanted to give more and more depth of value. And I think with the 12th house and Pisces, there's so much depth of value in this particular week that it's hard for me to condense it into something that is so short, because Pisces in the 12th house is so ever expanding, and there's so much depth to it. I could talk about Mars specifically in Capricorn in the 12th house for hours. Same with any other placement, and that's because of the way in which the Pisces and 12th house placements can kind of go. They go so deep, and there's so much of an ever-expanding connective ability that they have to everybody and anything. And so there's so much relatability to this 12th house placements. But it's about how you utilize that for your motivation, how you utilize that for your power, for your inspiration in others, for your ability to act on what you want, to be driven, right? Mars wants you to be driven towards something, towards goals, towards power, towards recognition, towards accomplishment. It wants to accomplish something. And in the 12th, it's trying to accomplish something it can't see, which is so difficult, but it's also allowing for you to be driven by things that you can't see. And in that process, figuring out that you are here for something much bigger and deeper and more powerful. And that's why I think Mars in the 12th housers can fall into spiritual careers and careers of healing and arts and even hospital work and running really philanthropic kind of spaces and helping art and artists and creating art. And there's so much healing ability in this. And I really urge you to look at your Mars ruler as well, and look at the rest of your chart and kind of bounce around my playlist down below, as well as any other resources are out there, because I know it's a lot more than it was when I first got into astrology. But I really hope that there's a lot of help that this was able to create new, and healing it was able to create new, as Mars wants you to feel more motivated, more inspired, more driven towards your goals. And I hope this drives you in some way to dive deeper within your own psyche, within your own kind of issues, to work towards a lot more healing and help. So I really hope this helped you, and I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And feel free to check out anything with me down below. Obviously, I love what I do. This is what I do for a living. So please like, comment, share, subscribe. All those things are going to help me. You know the YouTube algorithm. You know how it is. And if this video helps anybody, I just hope it helps one person. I hope it helps you, right? And thank you, and share this with anyone that you're interested in, that think might help from it. And of course, if you're interested in anything with me, if you want information about how to get a reading from me, there's stuff down below with that, my website, all those things, my socials. So feel free to reach out to me there. And I really hope that this helped you. I love you. I really, really do. And I hope you give yourself more compassion, more grace with your Mars and Pisces, Mars in the 12th house, to navigate through this. And so, I love you. I appreciate you. And I hope you guys have an amazing, blessed day. Thanks.